Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishna. Here basically we are discussing one other topic, that is city creation. So one of the person told that this basically which you are seeing basically that is the city creation. Apple creation is the one example basically. Like this basically each and every human needs basically which is created basically, that is one city creation. That is one city creation only basically. In this basically when you create the city basically, what are the things basically which is required basically? These all are the things basically which is required basically. Here basically main thing is when prime minister is going to die, when presidents are going to die, that data are also basically decided by the vitamins basically. I had taken one example basically, that when because they are taking the very dangerous decision basically, and which is going to affect to entire world basically, because in entire world basically the Indian nationality are staying. So that is the problem basically. So here basically one of the person told that when prime minister is going to die, that is also decided by the public only basically. You can just imagine basically everything basically public only basically do. Everything basically public is doing basically. Every each and every things basically are done by the public, and that is vitamin D basically. So one of the person told that vitamin D basically are deciding basically when prime minister is going to die and when presidents are going to die. For example, Sunil R. Nair basically when going to die basically, that is decided by the vitamins basically. That public decides basically, and that is basically created by doctors basically. That is also decided by the doctors basically. So in this assume basically that I will take one example. Assume that basically Sunil R. Nair basically is applying job for the Singapore basically. Just assume basically. Just taking as an one example basically, so that basically it will be very clear basically. So and assume that basically there are around 20 lakh Indian people basically. They basically got the information that basically Sunil R. Nair basically has applied the job basically in Singapore basically. Assume that way, just taking as an example. So they basically their main people basically are, they are going to take the decision basically, and they basically takes the decision on the base of, they basically never takes the decision. They basically pass the information to public only basically. That is 20 lakh people basically. They takes the decision that basically Sunil R. Nair is not supposed to get the visa of Singapore and not supposed to get job in Singapore basically. Reason, his basically background, that is the character certificate basically is not good basically. He is very low, bad, this, that, each and everything basically. Somebody basically done the badnami basically. Assume basically that. So due to that basically, he basically will not get the visa basically, and he basically will not get the job in the Singapore also. So like this basically one of the person told that. So like this basically slowly basically the issue basically escalates. Then basically he applied for a USA basically. USA also basically not gets the visa. So Singapore dollar, USA dollar, they also rejected. So that basically is going to affect to the India country where Sunil R. Nair basically is staying. Just taking as some rough example basically, how the things basically working basically. How basically they say that Sunil R. Nair is supposed to die basically. So just taking a sense. So like this basically they taken the decision. Then basically it's going to affect to the India economic basically. So Indian economists basically, that are the finance minister basically, they tracks basically. अरे यार ये मतलब US dollar basically and America dollar basically and Singapore dollar basically, they started basically stopping investment basically in India. Then they basically starts the track. How people basically dies basically, and how basically the plans are decided, but that basically we are discussing basically. How the plan basically are decided, how the America and Singapore basically handles the country basically of India basically, that we are discussing here basically. So they told that basically yaar, like this basically this was the person basically, that was Sunil R. Nair basically. He actually was rejected from the USA basically and Singapore basically because he has not got the job in the form of visa basically. Then they told that yes basically, yeah, you are correct. Due to that basically Singapore and America basically started. Like this basically the USA and America basically was, sorry, America and Singapore basically handling the India country basically. And one of the person told that basically we basically are India basically. In really basically the Singapore and America basically was handling the India basically, because they killed the Sunil R. Nair basically. Because government basically how they solve the problem. Two things are basically there. One is they basically solves the problem, or basically they finish that personally basically. Like this basically the India ways basically are there. In this assume that basically Singapore and USA basically taken the decision. That is basically the 5 crore people basically staying in India, USA basically that are Indian, and Singapore basically 20 lakh people. That means 5 crore 20 lakh people basically taken the decision basically that Sunil R. Nair is not supposed to get the job. Why he basically applied for the visa? Because he was not getting job in India basically. So here basically the Indian software professional company also basically came into this. Assume that basically there are around 3 crore people basically in India basically. So they basically also taken the decision that he is not supposed to get the job. So like this basically 8 crore 20 lakh people basically taken the decision that Sunil R. Nair is not supposed to get the job. And after that basically they government basically how government basically solves the problem, that basically we have already discussed. So like this basically they solved the problem basically by killing that particular Sunil R. Nair person basically. Just taking as an example, basically really basically they are not done that basically. So this was that vitamin basically, and vitamin equal to cities creation basically. And city basically, one city basically is not created, cities are created basically. Lots of people say that ऐसा करे तो कैसा रहेगा? Then we will create one city specially for Sunil R. Nair, and after killing that basically we will say that basically this city basically was responsible, and we will finish that city basically how that is basically the idea. Then he told that basically apply that idea, then basically see एक idea जो बदल दे आपकी दुनिया. So like this basically see people says basically whether it is correct or not. But you can't create one individual city by disconnecting the world basically, because that land basically where basically you are creating the city basically that is connected with the whole world basically. And few people say that basically if we divide the land also basically then one of the satellite person told that basically when you divide the land basically, when you merge the land basically, that time basically the chain basically is going to connect. Then he told that yes, here basically you are correct. So like this basically things are there. So here basically what we saw basically, we saw that basically how basically the decisions are taken basically. So doctors basically say that basically we basically don't take the decision, we basically give the combination of medicines basically, nothing else basically we will do basically. For example, one person basically was getting headache basically, head pain basically, assume that basically. So doctors basically recommended that basically take this medicine, that this, that few basically blood group also checked this, that. Then basically the blood group department basically told that basically these all are the cities basically which infected his body parts, and basically this, that, each and everything basically they detailed basically investigation done basically, and then basically they given the report that basically this was the reason basically why he was getting headache. So like this basically they got the report, and then basically they tried to solve the problem. Few medicine basically was able to solve the problem, few medicine basically was not able to solve the problem. Then basically again they basically done if basically one person basically is very high powerful basically, then basically that area basically gets, and if it's a person like normal, like for example Sunil R. Nair basically, so they basically solves the problem through cities recreation basically. Just taking as an example basically, so they basically solves the recreation, or basically they do some modification in the city, and like this basically they solves the problem of the headache basically. Like this basically the problems are basically done basically. So this is also vitamin D. Then basically vitamin E also basically we have discussed. So vitamin F basically, and vitamin K basically. So that basically we will see in next general video basically.